We will begin in about 5 minutes. Erev Tov and good evening. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of our congregation to our community commemoration of Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance Day. I wanted to let you know that on the table as you leave, there are candles to commemorate the Holocaust. This is a project sponsored by our Temple Brotherhood. Steve Siegel is a Brotherhood representative here. He's got his hand up if you have any questions. There's a donation card inside if you'd like. There's also the blessing and, of course, the candles, so please take one as you leave. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention the memory of Abe Meth, who was a long-standing member here for many, many years and very, very active in reading Torah and teaching Hebrew and pretty much everything. Abe was a Holocaust survivor. He was a Hungarian Jew. He worked with Schindler and with the effort to save over 1,000 Hungarian Jews that was commemorated in the film Schindler's List. And he was just short of 105 when he passed away. And we remember not only Abe as a person, but also Abe as a symbol of Jewish determination to survive and to rebuild their lives in the aftermath of the Holocaust. And so, Rabbi Lipschultz.
Well, thank you. Hi. Introduce myself. My name is Rabbi Lipschultz. I'm the new rabbi at Congregation Beth Emet. I wanted to say hello to everyone and greet. I am what you would call the children of the Holocaust shadow, which is, it took almost 2 decades for survivors to finally feel comfortable telling their stories, and when they finally did, thank God we have a treasure trove of history. I was raised in the shadow of those people telling their stories, and even though I am young, it was a very important factor in my life getting to know these people, and as we lose these people in our midst, we are obligated through the next generation to share their memories and to prevent that something like this never happens again.
I'd like to introduce Lee Shadrock, who's been instrumental in preserving the memory of the Holocaust in various ways and has been very involved in the effort to retain concern for the Holocaust Torahs around the world and specifically in our community. Lee.
Together, we are blessed and honored to have on loan 3 of the 1,564 Czech Holy Cross scrolls owned by the Memorial Scrolls Trust of the Westminster Synagogue in London. These 3 scrolls represent the Bohemian communities of Choslov, Kolin, and Urinoves. That one's a hard one. For 20 years, these scrolls were stored in the boarded-up Michal Synagogue near Prague, where they were subject to deterioration due to not being cared for. Today, about 1,400 are now on loan to communities around the world, with about 1,000 of them in North America. These scrolls are memorials to the many Jewish communities they once served. Following this program, join me in the social hall where I will be glad to answer questions including how the scrolls were saved. 2 of the scrolls will be available to view. Beth Emmet's scroll may be viewed in their foyer of their building.
Pretty much every congregation that I've served over the past 25 years or so has had a Holocaust Torah due to the efforts of the Westminster Synagogue and the Holocaust Torah Trust. Yom HaShoah is the day designated by Jewish communities around the world to commemorate the 6 million Jews who were murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators. It was originally created to serve as a Yom Kaddish Klali, a day for the community to recite memorial prayers for the Jewish victims. Because the death of these Jews occurred over a succession of years between 1933 and 1945, no actual yard site can be determined for many of them. When the Yom Kaddish Klali was first proposed, world rabbinic leadership could not agree on an acceptable date in the Jewish liturgical calendar to do it on. A group of survivors of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising suggested the 27th day of Nisan, 5 days after Passover and the day that the Jewish revolt of 1943 in the Warsaw Ghetto began. This proposal was accepted by default. And the first Yom HaShoah commemoration took place in Israel in 1951, and it was called the Yom HaShoah v'Hagvura, the day to remember the Holocaust and Jewish resistance. From this time forward, Yom HaShoah became the day that Kaddish is recited for the Jews who died during the Shoah, as well as the day that tribute is paid to the Jewish resistance fighters who fought against the Nazis.
From generation to generation was created in the spirit of the original Yom HaShoah v'Hagvura. 6 candles will be lit during the memorial service to acknowledge 6 different things the Jewish community needs to reflect upon during Yom HaShoah. Now, before I begin listing the candles, I want to give special thanks to Rabbi Bob Sternberg, who compiled a lot of this information. We're extremely grateful for Rabbi Bob Sternberg for being involved in this process. And we are grateful, but more importantly, we're grateful that he is helpful. And if you see Rabbi Bob Sternberg, thank him for us profoundly. The first one is remembering the world that was, the rich Jewish culture and religious life in Europe that was destroyed during the Shoah. Number 2 is remembering the Jews who suffered under Nazi persecution from 1933 to 1939. Number 3, remembering the Jews who engaged in significant acts of spiritual resistance against their oppressors, like organizing schools, minyanim, and healthcare facilities, sharing rations with those who had none, obtaining and circulating underground newspapers, and giving encouragement and spiritual strength to the brothers and sisters who felt helpless. Number 4, remembering the 6 million murdered Jewish souls. Number 5, remembering the 1.5 million Jewish children who numbered among the 6 million. And number 6, remembering the courage of Jewish resistance fighters who fought in the ghettos, in forests, in partisan groups, and in the concentration camps and killing centers. The 7th canto will be a tribute to those who rescued and protected the Jews. Many of the readings and songs of the service were written in Yiddish and in Hebrew. They were created by people who lived through the Shoah, some of whom survived and others who did not. All the readings and songs have been translated into English as well as transliterated so that people unfamiliar with Yiddish or Hebrew can easily follow the entire service. Historical information about each reading and song is also included in the text in the program. And again, this information, we give thanks again to Rabbi Bob Sternberg for providing this for us.
The first candle is remembering the world before the Nazi occupation in Europe. The first reading is an excerpt from the poem Lublin, My Holy City by Jacob Yankel Gladstein. Jacob Gladstein was born in Lublin, Poland in 1896 and emigrated to New York in 1914. He was known as an outstanding poet and novelist of the Impressionistic school, which called in Yiddish Insishish. I'm sorry, my Yiddish. Gladstein's 2 novels are considered important documents of the pre-World War II Jewish life in Poland. I'd like to now call up Carmen Berkowitz, a trustee of our temple, to read an excerpt from Lublin, My Holy City.
Lublin, my holy Jewish city. city of great poverty and festive holidays. Your Jewish street smelled of freshly baked black and rye breads, sour pickles, spices, herring, and Jewish faith. The rabbi's Besh Midrash, the shuls of the Maram and Marashal, and the numerous small workers' shuls shed a sanity over the quotidian of the momentous weekday business transactions. Belford carriers, while waiting for a kopek's hard earning, stepped into the rabbi's Besh Midrash to exult for a few minutes in the voice of Jacob as it issued from silken young throats. Lublin, my holy city, city of awakened class struggle, your tailor and shoemaker boys, your apprentices and errand boys, rose up to establish justice, equality, and brotherhood for all comrades and citizens. A hallowed light shone in their eyes as they marched joyously to prison, singing revolutionary songs. Lublin, my holy city of knowledge-thirsty young men and women, of early lilac odors of young Hebrew and the good saviors of proud Yiddish, of reformed gators, choirs, professional unions of our linked longing for Odessa and Warsaw, city of our trembling delight in Bielek, Frischman, Mendel, Barrett, Shalom Aleichem, and Raisin. My city of dreamy-eyed artists, poets, violin virtuosos. Lublin, my holy city, with your old, ancient, and new ancient cemeteries sheltering the tombs of the pious rabbis, graves which one dared not approach too closely except at times of extreme anguish, for the ground there was ablaze with sanctity. Holy city of mine, this you brought to pass through your consecration, that when 1.5 million Jews were burned, it was accomplished within the shadow of your almost 1,000 years of Yiddishkeit. This sacred cemetery you wanted for your very own, so that all your holy places should merge into one single holy place for that single holy being, the Jewish people. I draw off my shoes as I approach Madnik Woods. Its earth is sacrosanct, for the Jewish people are resting here within the shade of countless pious generations. Who will establish and rebuild you, my holy city, laid waste as you are and becoming one appalling memorial stone? Shingles are being hammered, roofs laid. A worn-out, loathsome world is being mended and patched. But my holy city, my world, can never be rebuilt.
We're about to embrace a Yiddish song. I am fortunately of one of those generations where my mom and grandparents would speak Yiddish behind my back, knowing that I could not understand. Picked up a few words. I had a Rebbe in rabbinical school who would occasionally tell us dirty jokes in Yiddish to see if we'd ever figure them out. And we would look with our dictionaries to try and catch him on some of those dirty jokes. But you cannot tell the story of the Holocaust without telling part of it in Yiddish. Cantor Baruch Kortian will now sing Ofen in Pitchik by the Fireside, a popular religious folk song about a Rebbe teaching young children the Hebrew alphabet in the Cheder of Eastern Europe. Children were taught their Hebrew alphabet by reciting the vowels and consonants combinations to a chant. With that, I give you our cantor.
Offen Pripetschik brennt a fire und in Stub ist heiß und der Rebbe lernt kleine Kinder lach dem alle Beis und der Rebbe lernt kleine Kinder lach dem alle Beis. Diese Kinder lach gedenkt der Teire, was sie lernen do. Sag schon noch einmal und sag auch noch einmal, komm jetzt alle Nakamu, Taka Nakamu, kommet zane po. Hier het kinderlach uit ter beren, werd ihr alleen versteht. Wie viel in die Oysters liegen Tränen, und wie viel geweint. Wie viel in die Oysters liegen Tränen, und wie viel geweint. Jette kinderlach gedenkte Teiren, was in Lären da. Sag schon noch einmal, und Taka noch einmal, komm ins alle po. Sag schon noch einmal, und Taka noch einmal, komm ins alle po.
And the cantor's wonderful Yiddish is due to his Yiddish school background and workman's circle. We'd like to now ask for the lighting of the first candle, Faye Henning Bryant, the president of Temple Beth Shalom, to please come forward to light the first candle.
The second candle is remembering the Nazi takeover of Germany, Austria, and Czechoslovakia. Susan Essen was born in Berlin in 1927. These are the highlights of her story. I'd like to invite Irene Lehrer, Financial Secretary of Beth Emmet.
Suzanne was born in Berlin, Germany, just before Hitler's rise to power. Her parents owned a successful surgical supply store. She lived a normal life, going to public school, where she discovered the joy of reading. When the law passed that Jewish children were forbidden to attend public school, the principal, who was a friend of her father, assured them that he would watch out for her. During dinner in August 1937, Suzanne's father told her and her mother that he would be going to Holland to visit relatives. 2 hours later, he was on a train. The following morning, a telegram arrived with the words, "The Dutch cows are beautiful," meaning that her father had crossed the border and arrived safely. Suzanne and her mother soon went to America. They spent 6 months in New York, where she went to public school. When her father arrived, they moved to Rochester, New York, where her parents opened another surgical supply store. Suzanne went on to earn her bachelor's and master's degrees, as well as a teaching certificate from the University of Rochester. She was involved with the Hillel and in a Zionist group. She remembers dancing in celebration when the UN voted to accept Israel. Suzanne married her husband Avram in 1954. They had 2 children, David and Esther, 7 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren. Throughout her life, Suzanne and her husband have led active Jewish lives. She joined the Hans Gay Hadassah chapter and eventually became the president. During the migration of Russian Jews, they got involved with helping several families acclimate to Rochester. In 1972, Avram and Suzanne were privileged to be part of the Zionist Congress in Israel. Their daughter Esther made Aliyah in 1978, where their family currently lives. Suzanne and Avram visit Israel yearly, and Suzanne, unbelievably, is today living in Rochester at the age of 92. And this is her brother Tom.
Thank you. Cantor Kortan will now sing Eli, Eli, my God, in Yiddish. This song is a popular Yiddish theater song published in 1907 and arranged by H.A. Russotto. It was first performed by Yiddish actor Boris Tomaszewski and later by a famous cantor, Yosela Rosenblatt, and a famous early actor before the talkies, or at the beginning of the talkies, Al Jolson. The words of Eli are both an outcry against the persecution of the Jewish people and an affirmation of Jewish belief in God. Eli expresses the conviction of Jews throughout the centuries to survive every form of oppression, to remain firm in our religious faith, and to be proud of our identity as Jews. The song ends with the first words of the Shema, which is the declaration of faith in Judaism. Jews traditionally recite this prayer in times of dangers or even when we are contemplating death. The third candle is remembering the spiritual resistance as described in an excerpt from The Scroll of Agony, the Warsaw Ghetto Diary of Chaim Kaplan. Chaim Kaplan was a Hebrew teacher in Warsaw before September 1st, 1939, the day that Poland was invaded by Germany, until the day of his deportation from the Warsaw Ghetto to Treblinka in August 1942. If you're able to, you can see on my blog an interview with the son and the grandson of Yitzhak Kotkowski, who was also in Warsaw on that very same day. And when he saw the German soldiers, he realized something was very wrong, and he left that very night for the East and spent the years of World War II in the Soviet satellite countries and was safe from the Nazis. I'd like to ask Fern Benkover to come forward to read an excerpt from this very touching diary.
March 1942. They, the Jews of Warsaw, love life. and they do not wish to disappear from the earth before their time. This fact that we hardly have any suicides is worthy of emphasis. Say what you wish, this will of ours to live in the midst of terrible calamity is the outward manifestation of a certain hidden power whose quality has not yet been examined. It is a wondrous, superlative power with which only the most established communities among our people have been blessed. We are left naked, but as long as this secret power is within us, we do not give up hope. The strength of this power lies in the indigenous nature of Polish Jewry, which is rooted in our eternal tradition, which commands us to live. Polish Jews say, together with our poet laureate Chaim Nachman Bialik, that one spark is hidden in the stronghold of my heart, one little spark, but it is all mine. I borrowed it from no one, nor did I steal it, for it is of me and within me.
Cantor will now sing Ani Ma'amim. This traditional Hebrew melody was sung by Jews in the ghettos and concentration camps in Nazi-occupied Europe. Its words affirm the belief Jews have in the coming of the Messianic age, when nations will no longer be in conflict, the world will no longer suffer, and where evil will no longer exist. And a personal note, Ani Ma'amim is one of the 13 principles that Maimonides set forward to us that we affirm our faith. And it is thus extra meaningful that the Jews in the concentration camps would sing this song as a last act to affirm their faith in their people and in their God.
Ani Ma'amim, Ani Ma'amim, Ani Ma'amim.
To now ask Warren Bencover, the financial secretary of our temple, to come forward to light the third candle.
The fourth candle is remembering the 6 million men, women, and children. The majority were part of a rich Yiddish-speaking community. We must also remember the Sephardic communities, the individuals who were not religious, those that had only one parent or grandparent that were Jewish, and those that may not have known they were Jewish. All were rounded up regardless of how integrated they were into the non-Jewish society that surrounded them, and systematically murdered. The world was silent as individuals, and entire communities were destroyed. Today, there are those that would deny that the Holocaust happened. Let us never forget. The following information is about Victor Ezrati. It is written from his survivor story, which is delivered in Ladino, which was also my grandmother Inez's native language, and translated into English by Isaac Maimon to a Ladino class, and reprinted in 1993 in Labaz, the Sephardic Voice. Victor was born in Salonika in 1925. At that time, the city was known as Chico Yerushalayim, Small Jerusalem, due to its rich Sephardic community. I'd like to invite Tipsy and Tony to come forward.
Victor had a large family. He was one of 5 children, 3 boys, 2 girls. One of his sisters had 6 children. Sadly, with the exception of a brother-in-law, they all perished in the Holocaust. In 1943, at 5 in the morning, the Gestapo broke into their home. They were marched with those already gathered in the streets to the railroad station. With little food and no water, 70 people were crowded into each of the 40 cars on that train, taking 2,800 people in a single trip. Victor was 18, strong and husky when he arrived in Auschwitz. He was stripped and forced to walk naked in a line past the doctor, who was probably Mengele. He pointed his finger to the right and to the left. Those on the right were to go to the gas chambers, those on the left to forced labor. Victor reported being in a similar line 3 different times during his capture. After 2 weeks in Auschwitz, Victor was taken to Birkenau. He was taught to be a bricklayer. He worked on a project there for 18 months. He reports that it was a horrifying experience as truckloads and truckloads of ashes were brought, and he was asked to spread the ashes over the mud in the interest of the building so that the soldiers would not dirty their boots. Victor reports being nauseated for days, knowing that these ashes were his family and the other victims. In October of 1944, they were marched for 10 days until they arrived in Breslau, Germany. In Breslau, a soldier with a bayonet stabbed Victor in the leg for walking too slowly. He bled profusely and bore a scar for the rest of his life. From Breslau, they were taken by cattle car to Mauthausen, and they walked from there for 3 days to Wels. In Wels, the 3,000 Jews that were there were put in tents. Most of the Jews were Ashkenazic. Only a few, 3 or 4 of them, were from Salonika. Everyone was sick with diphtheria, malnutrition, diarrhea. They were dying by the dozens, and the corpses were not removed. The stench was unbearable. When the Germans evacuated and left the camp shortly after, Victor and Guillaume Signor, another man from Salonika, just started walking. They were eventually picked up by the American soldiers, and after weeks in a hospital, they were taken by the Greek Red Cross back to Salonika. The Jews who escaped the Holocaust formed committees. They put all the returnees into an orphanage and found jobs for most. Victor worked on a farm for a year, and in 1946, he was drafted into the Greek army, serving in the National Royal Artillery for 4 years. In 1951, the American Jewish Distribution Committee brought numerous Sephardic Jews into different cities in the United States. Victor was placed in Portland, Oregon. He lived there for 2 years. the Portland Jewish community found Victor a job in the Portland hospital, and on visits to Seattle, he met his wife, Lucille Jean. They were blessed with a son, Jacob, and made the Northwest their permanent home. Victor reports that before the war, he had 3 wishes: to go to America, to meet a nice Jewish girl and get married, and to have a son. His wishes were granted.
Cantor Cortan will now sing Adio Querida, Farewell Beloved, a popular Ladino song depicting the tragic reality of so many mothers who were forced to push their children away in hope that they might live.
Tu madre cuando te parló y te quitó al mundo, corazón ella no te dio para amar segundo, corazón ella no te dio para amar segundo. Adio, adio querida, no quiero la vida, el amargarte es tú. Adio, adio querida, no quiero la vida, el amargarte es tú. Va a buscarte otro amor, a otras puertas, espera otro ardor, que para mí sos muertas. Espera otro ardor, que para mí sos muertas. Adiós, adiós querida, no quiero la vida, me la amargaste tú. Adio, adiós querida, no quiero la vida, me la amargaste tú.
For the lighting of the 4th candle, I'd like to ask Jack Ezrati, Victor Ezrati's son, to come forward.
Thank you, Jack. And a quick reminder, tomorrow at Congregation Beth Emmet at 9 a.m., Jack Ezrati will be saying Kaddish for his father for his yard site. It really would be nice if people from this community could also maybe join us as he says a special Kaddish for his father. 9 a.m. tomorrow at Beth Emmet. The 5th candle is remembering the 1.5 million children counted among the 6 million. We will now hear Gregoire Rosenthal's survivor memories. Gregoire was very young, hidden in plain sight, but unlike the children that were torn from their parents' arms, shot made to work, died of disease, malnutrition, or were gassed, Gregoire survived. For those who've been to Yad Vashem, no one has made it out of the Children's Memorial without tears. It's impossible. I've never seen anyone go in and go out the same. So with that, I'd like to invite Marilyn Newberg, Vice President of Beth Emmet, to share some of Gregoire's memories.
Good evening. Georgie survivor story. Love this woman. Georgie was born in 1941 in Budapest. She was a very young child. She has these vivid memories. She recalled when every man got a call from the military service. He later learned her father was put in a work camp with the other Jewish men. She remembers when about 1 year later, her father came back home. He had lost a leg. He was cleaning the minefield. She remembers how upset her father was when he learned the Hungarian government planned to close the borders between the city and the attached area. She remembers moving to a relative's home with her grandfather, her 2 aunts, and her cousin. They were so crowded in a 2-room apartment. Her grandfather went back to their house with his 2 daughters and 2 grandchildren. In 1944, they were deported to Auschwitz, and all of them died. Our building was marked with a yellow star. Her mother took Georgie and ascended to a different area of the city where a building manager opened an apartment for them, even though she knew they were Jews. She risked her life to do so. A pastor gave them false papers. Georgie's mother never felt secure. She stayed in the apartment all of the time. When the sirens went on, Georgie went down to the shelter with all the neighbors as they moved from apartment to the shelter. Georgie was lucky no one asked, "Where are your parents?" She remembers she was so happy in 1945 when the Russian soldiers came to their building and gave her a piece of fresh bread and a bag of sugar. I'm going to read a poem right now. It's called Just Like Me. Jody Kasner from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, was 16 years old when she went on the March of the Living, a program for teenagers which takes them to visit the Holocaust sites in Poland, commemorating the Yom HaShoah at Auschwitz and Birkenau, and celebrate Yom HaShoah, Israel Independence Day in Israel. In 1990, Canadian former participants in the March of the Living published a book of their own poetry and writings that were created after return from Poland and Israel. Jody Kasner was one of them. Just Like Me is what we're going to read for you now. Okay. Those victims of man's hatred,
There's the children just like me.
those who once had normal lives,
They're children just like me.
those uprooted from their lives,
They're children just like me.
those dragged from their homes in the middle of the night,
They're children just like me.
those robbed of everything they had,
They're children just like me.
those locked behind a ghetto wall,
They're children just like me.
those struck by pain and poverty,
They're children just like me.
those taken by starvation and diseases. Right here, baby.
They were children just like me.
Those forced to brave the endless winters,
They're children just like me.
those who never saw the outside world,
They're children just like me.
those left orphaned in the streets,
They're children just like me.
those robbed of their childhood,
They're children just like me.
and those robbed of their smiles.
They're children just like me.
Those who never even had a chance,
They're children just like me.
those ripped from the arms of their mothers,
They're children just like me.
those shipped in from far-off lands,
They're children just like me.
those forced to stand for days on end,
They're children just like me.
those killed before their time,
They're children just like me.
those marched unwillingly to their deaths,
They're children just like me.
those stripped and shot and gassed and burnt,
They're children just like me.
those buried in pits in unmarked graves,
They're children just like me.
those all too young to die,
They're children just like me.
those flickering lights in the cold, dark world,
were children just like me,
Those silent soldiers who fought off the darkness.
were children just like me,
Those 1.5 million innocent souls.
were children just like me,
Yes, those children of the Holocaust.
were children just like me.
And you, who killed my neighbors, my friends, and my family. You too were just
children
like
just like me.
The cantor will now sing the Yelitish Lullaby, Rosinkas mit Mandeln, Raisins and Almonds.
In dem Beis Hamikdosh, in a winkel cheder, sitzt die Almona bat Sion allein. Ich bin hoher wie der singt wie sie geseder und singt ihm zum Schlafen a Liederle schön. Unter Liederes Zwiegele steht der chlorweiß Ziegele. Das Ziegele ist gevorhanden. Das wird sein dein Beruf. Rajinkers mit Mandeln. Schlaf, Idele, schlaf, Idele, schlaf, Idele,
The sixth candle remembers the Jewish freedom fighters with a reading from The Lead Plates at the Ram Printing Press by Avraham Sutzkever. Also, Avraham Sutzkever was a Yiddish poet who was a member of the renowned Vilna literary circle called Young Vilna. From 1941 to 1943, he lived in the Vilna ghetto under Nazi occupation. Before the ghetto was liquidated, he escaped to the forest and fought with Jewish partisans. He continued to write poetry during the Holocaust. His extensive writings cover life in the ghetto as well as various incidents of partisan activity. One of his poems, Kol Nidre, is the only literary creation in existence to document the liquidation of Vilna's small ghetto on October 1st, 1941, which was Yom Kippur. On March 12th, Sutzkever escaped Lithuania and went to Moscow. He settled in the Soviet Union for the remainder of the war, and in 1947 settled in Israel. The Lead Plates of the Ram Printing Press concerns an instance of Jewish resistance activity in Vilna, which was planned but never carried out. I'd like to ask John Werbel, the treasurer of our temple, to come forward to read this excerpt from The Lead Plates at the Ram Press, which was from the Vilna Ghetto, September 12th, 1943.
The lead plates at the Ram Press, arrayed at night like fingers stretched through bars, to clutch the lit air of freedom, to make for the press plates to seize, the lead plates at the Ram Printing Works. We were dreamer, we had to be soldiers, and melt down for our bullets the spirit of the lead. At some timeless native lair, we unlock the seal once more, shrouded in shadow by the glow of a lamp, like temple ancients dipping oil into candelabrum of festive gold. So pouring out line after lettered line we did, letter by melting letter the lead. Liquefied bullets gleamed with thoughts, a verse from Babylon, a verse from Poland, seething, flowing into one mold. Now must Jewish grit, long concealed in words, detonate the world in a shot. Who in Vilna ghetto has behest the hands of Jewish heroes clasping weapons, has beheld Jerusalem in its throes, the crumbling of those granite walls, grasping the words smelted into lead, learning their sounds by heart. Vilna Ghetto, September 12, 1943.
Hannah Senesh was a young poet from Eretz Yisrael who joined a group of Jewish resistance fighters who parachuted into Nazi-occupied Yugoslavia in an attempt to rescue Jews. In 1944, she crossed the border into Hungary, was caught by the Nazis, and executed. Hannah Senesh died a martyr, refusing to give any information about her partisan group to the Nazis. Her diary and poetry, which survived, are a source of inspiration. Her poem, Blessed is the Match, was put to music and will now be sang by Cantor Quartet. I'd like to now ask Minya Kalish, a member of our temple both of whose parents were survivors of the Holocaust, to come forward to light the sixth candle.
I'm lighting this candle in memory of my parents, Sarah and Teddy J., their extended family, and all the 6 million who we're here today to honor. I'm going to do it.
As we sit here today, we wonder about humanity and the state of nature of human beings. There are those who honor what it means to be a human being and deserve the title as righteous. Before we conclude with the seventh candle, I want to give a sense of hope. There are good people out there. When I was a rabbi in Rock Island, Illinois, that's when the Tree of Life Pittsburgh massacre happened. And I was with a bunch of Lutherans at the time teaching a class on Shabbat. What surprised me was the next day. Immediately, every church I could think of in my area said, what can we do to help? And one of the large evangelical church brought their security team with us for this Saturday so we could feel comfortable praying again. I just want to remind people that there are good people out there. There are people who tried to stop this darkness from happening. So the seventh candle is to remember the rescuers and the protectors. Avram Zutzker was hidden by Jonava Bertozwickitz, a Polish woman who also brought food to his family in the Vilna ghetto. Sutzker planted a tree in her memory in the Garden of the Righteous at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. In 1980, he wrote this poem in her memory, but never gave it a title. I'd like to invite Reverend Denise Landis Unity Light of Grace to read this poem on page 14.
Untitled, 1980. And when I go up as a pilgrim in the winter to recover the place I was born, and the twin to self I am in my mind, then I'll go back, then I'll go in black snow as a pilgrim to find the grave of my Savior, Yenova. She'll hear what I whisper under my breath. Thank you. You have saved my tears from the flame. Thank you. Children and grandchildren, you rescued from death. I planted a sapling. It does not suffice in your name. Time in its gyre spins back down the flue, faster than nightmares of nooses can ride, quicker than nails. And you, my Savior, in your cellar, you hide me, ascending in dreams as a pilgrim to you. You'll come from the yard in your slippers, crunching the snow, so I will know. Again, I'm there in the cellar, degraded and low. You're bringing me milk and bread sliced thick at the edge. You're making the sign of the cross. I'm making my pencil its pledge.
I'd like to now ask Jan Carnes, the Vice President of the Unity Light of Grace Church, to come forward to light the seventh candle. I'd like to now ask Nan Rubin, a trustee of our temple, and Natalie Morrison, the Vice President of Bet Emet, to come forward to read responsively the reading at the bottom of page 14. We remember them.
In the rising of the sun and in its going out, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them.
In the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them.
In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them.
In the beginning of the year
and when it ends, we remember them.
When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them.
When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them.
We are now going to do some Jewish ritual events to sanctify the lives of these people who have been lost. Let us read the 23rd Psalm together in English. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He gives me repose in green meadows. He leads me beside still waters to revive my spirit. He guides me on the right path, for that is his nature. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm. You are with me. You prepare a banquet for me in the presence of my foes. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness shall be the portion all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Everyone, please rise as Cantor leads us in El Mali Rachamim. And you're going to do
the Mali Rachamim, Shochein Bom Romim, Ametzei Nucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Girushim U'Tehorim, Kezohar Arakia, Mazirim, Et Nishmat Yakireinu Shel Halchu Na'olam, Barachamim Yastirem B'Seter Kinafar L'Olamim, V'yitzror b'yitzror Chachim Et Nishmatam, Adonai Hu Nachalatam, V'yanuchu B'Shalom Al Mishkavam, V'nomar Amen.
Let us read the English together. O God, full of compassion, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to our beloved ones who have entered eternity. O God of mercy, let them find refuge forever in the shadow of your wings, and let their souls be bound in the bond of everlasting life. God is their inheritance. May they rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. We now come to the mourner's Kaddish, which, as we say, does not speak of death, only affirms faith in God and our faith in each other. Let us prepare together, us two rabbis, as we lead you in the mourner's Kaddish together. Yitadal v'yitadash shnei Rabba, Elma divrah firuzeh v'yamlit ma'atozeh, v'chayechon u'yomechon u'chayei devor beit Yisrael, v'ahalal b'zman kariv u'ru'onechi, Yehei shnei Rabba b'rach ha'olam u'lomei u'maya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitkar v'yitruman v'yitnaseh, v'tadar v'yitalel v'yitalal shmei v'kudisha v'yilu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush v'chata v'nechamata, damiran v'alma v'naru, amen. Yehesh la'ama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'meru, amen. Oseh shalom v'noah, Yoseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'meru, amen.
Please be seated as we continue with the concluding song at the top of page 17, Zog Nit Kaimun, sung by Cantor Corten.
Sag nicht Himmel, als du gehst dem letzten Weg, als Himmeln bläuen auf Vorstellen bläuet. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebeckter Schau, es wird erfolgen, unser Trug mir seinen Do. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebeckter Schau, wird erfolgen, unser Trug mir seinen Do. Von grünem Abendland bis weißem Land von Schnee, wir kommen auch mit unser Heim, mit unser Weh, und wo gefallen ist, spritzt von unser Blut, sprossen wird durch unser Quore, unser Mut, und wo gefallen ist, spritzt von unser Blut, unser Gebore, unser Mut. Wer durch unser Gebore, unser Mut.
Before we conclude the evening with the singing of the Hatikva, I'd like to first ask all those who are Holocaust survivors or the children of Holocaust survivors or close relatives of Holocaust survivors to please rise. And now I'd like to ask everyone here to join them and please rise as we sing together the Hatikva as we conclude this evening.
This concludes our service for tonight. I would like to, those, as Rabbi of Congregation Beth Emet, I'd like to thank Rabbi Kaplan and the congregants of Temple Beth Shalom for hosting us this year for our joint Yom HaShoah service. I thank you all for coming, and may their memory forever be a blessing. Rabbi Kaplan, any final words? Thank you. This concludes our service. You may now, as they say b'shalom, may you go in peace, and zichron lebracha l'kol ha'amim.
Make sure to see the Torahs and the exhibits in the social hall, and learn about the Czech Torahs, and also see the Holocaust poster exhibit. It's all in the social hall.
Please try and see the Torahs if you can, and for tomorrow, for those who are able to come to honor Jack Ezrati's father, tomorrow at 9 a.m. at Beth Emet.
Really